Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of a Man once again, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. We do it basically once a month, but we're going to review a Western novel. Today we're going to do epic fantasy. So we're going to review Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and sorry if my voice is a little weird. I just woke up literally like 10 minutes ago and I was like, crap, I haven't recorded a video for Sunday. So here I am. And yeah, so this is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is published by Tor, the fantasy section, I guess. It's epic fantasy, and I guess you could call it YA fantasy to an extent. It has a lot of the modern YA tropes, strong independent female character. She's not like other girls. She's going to overthrow the government, that kind of thing. But I think it failed as a YA. There's a little bit too much, too big of a fan base that was already used to it being adult fantasy, if I remember correctly. I'm not exactly sure. If you guys know, please let me know in the description. And yeah, so since this is a Western novel, I don't have to talk about art or fan service. So there's only going to be 3 things I look at in my review. I'll look at the plotline, the characters, and the world building. Yeah, so the premise here is basically what happens if the bad guy won and, you know, he stayed in power for thousands of years. That's the basic beginning of the book. After that, we basically have a heist that's going to happen. That's going to hit the noble class as well as the Lord Ruler, which is the evil guy that won. And yeah, so that's the basic premise, and we follow this girl as she kind of finds herself, her powers, and then helps the revolution, essentially. So it's like epic fantasy, Hunger Games, Divergent-esque, kind of. Not really, but like a little bit. Like Vin shares a lot of similarities with Katniss Everdeen, or Katniss Everdeen does with Vin. I'm not really sure which one came first, but you know, it's in it's in that branch of character types. So yeah, the plot line here was really solid. It's a very traditional Brandon Sanderson style, where he's like really slow going at the beginning. It picks up a little bit in the middle, and then the last third basically is straight up, you know, fast. Everything is blowing up. Stuff is happening everywhere all the time, and you're just going through this crazy journey for like the last 200 pages of a book, and it's very, very good. It took me a long time to read this, not necessarily because I was bored, but because since I've been reading so much manga and light novels, I'm very used to a very fast-paced occurrence of events, kind of. And Mistborn, being an epic fantasy and being a Sanderson book, does not follow that really quick pace. We do get a really nice prologue, basically. It kind of sets up how downtrodden the worker servant class is, and then we get our main character. We kind of go through her doing her like daily life, basically. We kind of figure out how oppressed she is, how horrible her life has been. And then the guy from the prologue comes back, and now he's in charge of a thieving crew, of a heist group. And he recruits her because there's something special about her. And then we, it says she's a Mistborn on the back of the book. So the special thing is that she has powers over allomancy, which basically means she ingests metals, and then she burns them, and then she has the ability to use them to give her special abilities. So she's one of these people, and she's recruited into the crew, and then we get a lot of character development from her. As this happens, she becomes an infiltrator. She infiltrates the noble class as, you know, a distant noblewoman from like somewhere else that comes in. And then we get a lot of political intrigue. And then at the end, we have this huge confrontation. The revolution finally happened. People rose up like Hamilton and just overthrew the government, kind of. And it was a really enjoyable story. And I said like the major points, but they happen like 200 pages apart, so it's not as fast going as it kind of seems. But yeah, it was really great. I really loved it. Um, it's just traditional Sanderson. Although in this case, he's actually not as good as he is in Stormlight Archive at really bringing everything together at the end. I mean, he did. No doubt about it. The thing is, he's still a little rough around the edges right now. Because if I remember correctly, this is his second book. Yeah, it's his second book because Brandon Sanderson is known as the author of Elantris back in here, where everywhere else he's known as the author of Mistborn. So yeah, the characters here are very, very good. There's basically three main characters. There's Kelsier, there's Vin, and then there's Sazed, Sazed. It's hard to pronounce sometimes, but yeah. So we get Kelsier, who's like the father of the revolution, essentially. He's like the very swaggy Han Solo version of George Washington, kind of. He has a lot of bravado, a lot of charisma, and just a very powerful presence. And he kind of makes everything happen. He's the reason the story moves along, kind of. Vin is our main character. She isn't an everyman. Like, she's not someone that you can, like, completely envelop yourself in and feel like you're the one telling this, you're the one going through the story. She has very clear, defined, specific traits, but her individualism, I guess, is very justified. Her backstory really makes it viable that she would be like this. And it is kind of refreshing from other epic fantasy, because most of the characters are male in epic fantasy, and she's being a female is a little different, and she's also a lot less trusting than a lot of male characters in fantasy. They tend to be like what's it called? Not like very easily led around, but they're much more trusting, and she's very much not like that. So it's a really interesting thing. There's only one problem with her character, and it's that she's this loner, untrusting person, and then out of a sudden she meets a boy, and now this boy is like her love interest, and it's like that happened a little too quickly. And it's not that it wasn't like special. There's a lot of special things about the way that they describe them meeting and them interacting. It's just like she's been distrustful her whole life, and then suddenly she meets this boy, and now he's like worth breaking her like personal coding, kind of. It just feels a little odd, but I mean, fair, whatever. It's fantasy. It's not supposed to be exactly correct. It's just a little tropey, I guess. It really falls into that YA kind of thing, like Katniss Everdeen, where she's like, I'm this badass woman, I don't need anyone, and then Peeta's nice to her, and suddenly she's like, oh god, I love him. And it's like, sure, man, I guess. But I think that's a very, like, that might be very specific to me as a complaint. I'm not really sure, though. I think most people wouldn't even care. But if you do care, please let me know. And if I'm wrong, let me know as well. But yeah, and then the other character is Zayst. He's kind of like the moral fiber, the moral tissue that connects everyone together, kind of. He's a terrace man, which is a very special type of individual. He's not a person, like human per se, but he's a other type of humanoid, essentially. But he's basically a person, or like a human person. He has special abilities that let him have a lot of stored up knowledge, kind of. It's really interesting how it works. But yeah, and then there's a bunch of other secondary characters that are interesting, but not necessarily the best. Like, they're special and stuff, but they really function for their purpose in the story, not necessarily as individuals, usually. So yeah. And then the world building is probably the best part. The magic system is crazy good. It's hard, which means it follows rules very closely most of the time. It basically here, it's a type of internal external type of thing. you ingest a metal, you burn it, and then you're granted a special ability. There's two types of people that can use it. There's Mistings, who can only use one ability in their whole life. And then there's Mistborns, who can access all of the abilities. Which means if they ingest a different type of metal, they'll be able to use all of those metals. If another person does it, they won't be able to. They'll only be able to access the one that they're born with, kind of. If that makes sense. There's 10 metals that you can ingest. And you have to be very careful with the type of metal you ingest, because if the alloy is incorrect, or the, I guess, like, isotope of the metal is incorrect, you are gonna suffer like huge consequences, essentially. And you can run out of these metals at it like every time. So it really makes every battle between these people a battle of attrition, as well as a battle of skill and intelligence, more so than who has the most magic, if that makes sense. It's really interesting, and it almost plays out like chess, but like with powers, instead of like, yeah, I'm just gonna brunt force it. Like, you know, they're not Gandalf. They're not just going to pull out like a giant fireball when they need a fireball. Whatever, it has to work within the rules of the magic system. And it's really great. I really like it. There's another magic system that's introduced, but it's not really explained. It's called Ferrokimi, which basically means people can own metals, turn them into storage facilities, and then store something in them. He can use copper to enhance his intelligence, so he can store memories. You can use steel to store strength, I think, and like, you know, a bunch of different stuff like that, which I thought was really cool as well. And I've heard there's another one, there's another type of magic, but I'm not really sure. But yeah, and then the world is really cool because it's this like dead world, basically. There's ash falling from the sky all the time. There's a red sun. Everyone is downtrodden. There's no green plants. Everything is like black and gray and brown. And it still functions somehow, but it's really interesting, and I really liked it. And yeah, so that's basically it for Mistborn. I thank you guys very much for watching. Sorry if you guys are my manga and light novel watchers. I'll get back to that soon. And yeah, if you're new, please like and subscribe and comment down below. I'm going to make a series of videos around the Wheel of Time coming up really soon, kind of like in August. I'll announce it in July, but it's going to be like a 6-month series where I read through the Wheel of Time, give my thoughts, kind of prepare for the next year when the Wheel of Time TV show comes out, and it'll be really cool. Hopefully you guys join me for that, and yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.